tuning into Brainstorm, a podcast diving into the challenges and adventures that are associated with mental health. Today's episode is titled Treatment. We'll be discussing warning signs for adolescent mental illness, the stigma associated, and some of the difficulties with residential treatment for mental illness in teens. We will also be privileged to hear from our guest speaker, Shelby Nielsen, a clinical mental health counselor and primary therapist at Elevations RTC in Syracuse, Utah. We are glad you are here and hope you enjoy this episode. Our first topic for today's episode is warning signs of mental illness in adolescents. One of the most important things to understand about adolescent mental health and illness are the warning signs that something isn't right. It is only when mental illness goes unnoticed and untreated that they turn into crises that become more and more difficult to overcome. Breaking the silence is the first step towards healing. Quote, "Only by breaking the silence can we start to release the burden of these hidden truths, paving the way for healing and growth. It is through confronting our pain, sharing our stories, and seeking understanding and support from others that we can begin the journey towards healing and reclaim our inner strength." Close quote. Today I'm going to talk about the 7 most common warning signs that you should know about if you come in contact with teens in your personal or professional life. Warning sign number 1 is a depressed mood. If you notice that a teen in your life seems to be sadder than normal, maybe they're being quiet, maybe they're more reserved, you may even notice them crying. These are definitely things to be aware of. The second warning sign is an anxious or preoccupied mood. If you're noticing that your teen is more worried than normal, they seem more nervous, maybe they're shaking, maybe they're picking at their nails, these are things to be aware of and to be curious about. Try to figure out what's going on. Warning sign number 3 is changes in school performance. This could be positive or negative changes. I think often we associate mental illness with negative changes, like maybe they had good grades once upon a time, but now that they're struggling, things are much worse and they're getting worse grades. I once knew a girl who, before deciding that she wanted to end her life, she made it her goal to leave a legacy. And what she planned to do was to get straight A's in school, to make wonderful, beautiful friendships, to achieve the best scores she's ever gotten in her sports teams, to do everything to the fullest, to the best of her ability, so that when she left, that she would have left a life of love and perfection behind her. And luckily, she was not successful in her attempts to end her life. But it is important to recognize that these changes we're noticing in our teens are not always for the worse. If someone has been getting mediocre grades their whole life and suddenly they're getting straight A's, it's important to note these differences. Warning sign number 4 is physical complaints. This could include a stomach ache, headache, extreme fatigue, nausea. These are all physical complaints that are associated with mental illness. Warning sign number 5, changes in sleeping habits. This could be both an excess amount of sleep and an extremely little amount of sleep. Warning sign number 6, changes in eating habits. Similar to sleeping habits, this could be an excess amount of eating or a limited amount of eating. Both of these things are things to take note of. And warning sign number 7 is acting out. This includes sneaking out, going to parties, engaging in promiscuous sexual activity, alcohol and drugs. All of these things, especially if these activities are out of the norm for the teen, these are things that we should be paying attention to, right? Why are these things coming up? Why are they suddenly engaging in these activities and behaviors? What is the root cause? It is super important for us to be aware of these symptoms so that when we see them in the lives of our teens, that we know how to respond, and we know when to reach out and offer support and guidance.
Hello listeners, are you feeling a little lost, stressed, or just need someone to talk to? Well, let me introduce you to our sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the world's largest online counseling platform where you can connect with licensed therapists from the comfort of your own home, anytime, anywhere. Picture this. You're sitting on your couch, sipping your favorite drink, and you suddenly realize that you need to chat with someone. No need to wait for appointments or worry about transportation. BetterHelp has your back. And let me tell you, the range of expertise on BetterHelp is incredible. Whether you're dealing with anxiety, depression, stress, relationship issues, or anything else life throws your way, there's a therapist who's right for you. Plus, it's all about convenience. Schedule secure video or phone sessions, exchange unlimited messages with your counselor, and take charge of your mental health on your own terms. Wow! So if you're ready to invest in yourself and start feeling better today, head to BetterHelp.com and get 10% off your first month when you use the promo code BRAINSTORM. That's BetterHelp.com, promo code BRAINSTORM. Take that first step towards a happier, healthier you, because you deserve it. And we're back. I really hope you guys enjoyed that. BetterHelp has helped me a ton. Again, use promo code BRAINSTORM for 10% off. Our next topic is going to be the stigma around mental health. We all know that mental health is just as important as physical health. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of misunderstanding and stigma around getting help for mental health. If somebody has the flu or a cold, right, they're going to stay in bed all day because they're sick. And it's socially acceptable. Yeah, you have the flu. You gotta rest, you gotta drink fluids, and you're probably gonna watch YouTube videos all day. But when you're depressed and you feel the need to stay in bed, or you have no motivation to do anything, even play the video games that you enjoy playing or engage in the hobbies that you enjoy engaging in, right? We call that laziness. Where do we shift from it needing to be a disease that is like this germ in your body to a germ inside your head? Because that's what depression pretty much is. It's a germ that's inside of your head. But you can't cure it from just resting all day, right? You need to be able to talk about what's going on inside of your life. You need to be able to express that to family members, friends, or a therapist. The unfortunate barrier is the stigma. A lot of people don't really want to hear about your issues, or when they hear about these issues, they just perceive you as being lazy or weak. Why can't you get out of bed? I was able to get out of bed. You're not sick. There's nothing wrong with you. Mental health is for losers. Mental health is for the weak. It's for the lazy. It's for people who just want to whine all the time. That's how it's perceived. I genuinely resent this thinking. It's genuinely the worst way to go about treating our fellow people. Humans are a social, emotional creature. We have literally built society, parts of our society based off of our emotions. What is a wedding if not love? What is love if not an emotion? You get what I mean? So if we can view the positive parts of emotion so greatly that we're going to make structures in our society for them, but when we have negative moods that are serious and impactful in our lives, and we don't make structures to surround that and help that, what are we doing as a society? Why are we not allowing people to express their emotions, talk about what's going on in their lives? Studies have shown that talking about your feelings and expressing what's going on in your life not only benefits you, but if everybody in the community does it, it benefits the community. Mental health is not something that we should be taking lightly. It's something that should be taken as seriously and treated as seriously as physical ailments. When people do not talk about what's going on in their life and they bottle it up, they start to experience extremely negative emotions. This is where we get people self-harming or having suicidal ideations or even committing suicide. It is no joke. Mental health is not something to be played around with. Mental health is not something to be treated as if it's just this tiny little thing that you're weak if you want to get into or if you want to get help for. It is okay to ask for help, and it is okay to need time to rest because of your mental health. The stigma around mental health can be very problematic in getting this help, especially for teenagers, especially for adolescents who are told that it's just their hormones, it's just puberty, or it's just high school. It's not forever. But for some, it literally is forever. These feelings, the anxiety, the depression is forever. And when it becomes even more serious to disorders like bipolar disorder or OCD or schizophrenic disorders, right? That's when we really need to step in. And that's when we see a lot of people, even on TikTok, being like, look at this person. They're so crazy. They're so wild. Why are they acting like this? Avoid anybody like this at all costs. It really adds to that stigma. At the end of the day, we really need to just be better people when it comes to other people's emotions. We need to treat people better, and we need to be more accepting to people's feelings. We need to understand that as a human, it is important that we feel things and we talk about those feelings. The final takeaway that we need to get from this is that we need to be better. We need to accept people's feelings and emotions, and we need to allow people to talk about those things. And when we see it in public, when we see people having symptoms from their disorder, maybe they don't even know they have a disorder, we need to be more accepting and give people the benefit of the doubt. They're not crazy. They need help.
Now we will have the privilege to hear from Shelby Nelson, a primary therapist at Elevations RTC and clinical supervisor at the Approach Home. He received his Master's of Education in Clinical Mental Health Counseling from the University of Utah. He also graduated with a certificate in positive psychology, making an excellent addition to the clinical team at Elevations. He has training in EMDR and DBT, which he uses with the adolescents he works with at Elevations daily. Let's take a listen. Hi, Shelby. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're excited to be talking with you.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So today, the topic for this interview is going to be how parents can help support their children in order to prevent the need for long-term residential treatment. So our first question for you is, what parents should be teaching their children from an early age to encourage positive mental health in their children?
Okay, so I really think that for this topic, it comes down to appropriate developmental lessons and milestones for children. For example, so as a kid's getting a really little kid, you don't want to be going into the deeper issues or deeper struggles that could be coming up. You want to meet them where they're at. That's going to be a very much a thing that you always are going to want to do, is meet your child at the developmental appropriate level that they're at. And so as you're teaching them appropriate boundaries, appropriate expectations, appropriate friendships, things like that, a big thing that I think sometimes gets lost is parents also modeling those things for kids. And so that's one of the biggest things I would say especially when they're really young. Kids are smart, and when they're little, their family is essentially their whole world. And so they're looking, they're watching, and they're seeing everything that mom and dad are doing, or whatever the family looks like, and they are seeing struggles and mistakes. Sometimes we forget just how smart and attuned little kids can be, and so we forget that they're able to pick up on struggles, attachment difficulties, traumas that we're projecting onto them, various things like that from a very young age. Kids are picking that up, and that lays the groundwork for how they can function as they're going through life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So the second question is, when a parent first starts recognizing signs of mental illness in their children or adolescents, what should the first response be?
I think the very first response is for a parent to sit with and validate their child as a human. It's a very, very similar to when a kid comes into my office and I meet with them for the first time. I'm not trying to fix the issue. I'm not trying to tell the kid there's something wrong with them. I'm trying to just sit and let the kid express themselves. And so hopefully, as a parent has helped their child through various stages that I talked about before, hopefully when those warning signs start popping up, they're able to ask questions and just sit with and listen and let their child feel heard. Because too many times, like, adults will go into problem solving modes. Oh, there's this issue, I have to fix it right away. I'm as guilty of that as anybody with my own children. And a lot of times we'll just go into, okay, I know the issue. I know this, I know that. And we're not allowing the kid to have a voice or to have the ability to just open up and get everything out, because sometimes there'll be things that we'll miss as well. So those red flags might pop up, and the red flags could be indicative of something else that we can miss completely because we go into that problem solving so quickly.
Yeah, I think it's easy as parents, you want to fix, right?
Yeah,
you just
absolutely.
want your child to be happy and healthy, and so it can be easy to like try to swoop it and save the day.
Yes, like, gosh darn it, I know. I'm the adult here. I'm the one in charge. So And yes, you are the adult, you are the parent, and you do probably have some of these life lessons, but you also don't know exactly all the things. No matter how well you know your kid, they're going to surprise you with something new. And there's going to be something that you haven't seen that you can pick up on by just listening.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so our third question is, now that, let's say your child's been diagnosed with a mental illness and you've been going through it for quite some time and it's getting pretty severe and you're kind of in the depths of mental illness with your child, what can a parent do to best support their child in this more severe state?
It comes down to the idea of support. A non-judgmental supportive stance. Once again, there's a similarity to this answer as there was to the previous question of being able to sit with and understand your child. So, for example, I have a client who I work with currently who is struggling with some very intense things right now. It's an anniversary that they're going through, and they recently were able to open up with their parents about how the previous year when they were struggling, parents didn't stop and listen. Parents didn't ask those questions, and so they had no idea just how deep it went. I mean, of course, parents are going to be going and helping find resources and helping find appropriate and effective things, but there still is that aspect of being the parent and spending that time with your kid, because your child craves the attention and craves what only you as a parent can give to them, and there's really no substitute for that time, being able to just be with them and let them open up, let them talk about the struggles. It goes deeper than just like, oh, how was your day? Like these little questions that are sometimes like buzzword type questions we ask. It's actually asking the question and meaning it and showing that your child throughout their entire life that you're going to listen to it. The more that you listen to your kid as they're younger and as they're coming up, the more that you're going to actually get them opening up when they're older and have these real struggles coming up, and approaching them and just letting them be heard so that they do feel comfortable continuing to come to you as a support.
Yeah. So would you say like that the best way to do that would be to just go to your child and just straight up ask them like, hey, you've been going to therapy for a while. I just wanted to check in with you and see like, how's that going? What are you talking about? Like what are those more pointed questions, especially with like adolescents? It may be a little bit more difficult to like foster those conversations. So like, what would you say are like a couple starting points that parents could use to like initiate those conversations with their children?
I think it starts with when they're younger.
Okay.
So these questions that we're asking, we're going through these different developmental stages. If you've established that ability to let your child feel heard, let your child feel listened to, that you're appropriately in the space with them, it's going to open that up much easier down the road. Now, if you've already got to that point and you haven't done that as well as you maybe could, because none of us are perfect, there are still ways that you can engage with them. And I think the one of the biggest things here is going to be patience. It's not going to be a one-time deal. You're not just going to ask your kid all of a sudden out of the blue, hey, how are you doing? What's wrong? You went to therapy, you haven't talked about it. They're going to probably shut down. They're not going to answer. But if you can just sit with them and just ask them, just be available. Once again, that availability, that time that you spend with them is so important. These kids that we work with in treatment, we do family therapy with them every week. And so early on in family therapy, oftentimes we're working with parents who have struggled one way or another, maybe haven't given that time or haven't whatever. And it's a non-judgmental stance towards the parents as well, and to yourself as a parent, to understand that, hey, I want to do better. And I'm going to put this time in. And oftentimes parents get frustrated because their child will shut down. And it can take weeks or months. It takes a lot of time sometimes to get them to the point of, hey, is this actually real that I can trust this parent? Because sometimes the kid won't feel like they can trust them. And you do have to sit there and spend the time and let them have that opportunity and give them that opportunity to be able to trust.
Yeah. I think something you said just sparked interest in me, where you said that parents are looking so hard to find those resources to help their kids that they can forget that they are the most important resource for their kids. So awesome. Okay, and then the last question is, when would you say it's time for a parent to consider a type of longer residential treatment like Elevations where you work? When does that become something that needs to be considered?
Most of the students who I work with have been to other versions of treatment. And so if the parent's going through this, any parent who is hearing this, who is going through this process, has probably tried out an IOP or different types of treatment, day treatment type things, or they've had their child in struggles, having to go to a mental hospital or a stabilization hospital, these various things. So a lot of times, before getting to the point of going to long-term treatment, such as Elevations, other facilities, there are a lot of other steps that happen before a child gets to that point. Now, that being said, there are exceptions. That we've had some students come straight from home to a long-term residential facility, and it gets to a point that parents can't manage it. And I think a lot of times parents will fall into these patterns of trying to manage the struggles that their child has, and judging themselves and telling themselves, I can't send my child to treatment because that makes me a bad parent, type of a thing. We have these stigmas that pop up. And so it's really important to also consult a team, to consult with professionals, whether it's an IEP from a school, or whether it's medical professionals get testing, psychological testing done, various things. Those types of things are going to help so that parents aren't alone on an island. Because a lot of times parents who do have children who have struggled to the point of self-harm, suicide, various different things, intense long-term depression, anxiety, all these different issues, unresolved trauma, they're going to feel very much on an island and alone. And so getting those resources, talking to an education consultant who is somebody who would help them find the resources that they need, talking to their school district, these various resources that are out there, I think will help. It helps parents not feel like they're all the way alone and they have to figure it out. They have to be on call 24/7 to make sure that their child doesn't hurt themselves or their child doesn't fall into the worst state. So it's being willing to humbly ask for help from outside sources to know and get different inputs on when your child would need that type of long-term treatment, as well as doing those shorter things, the shorter treatment or a day program, things like that.
Okay, so it kind of sounds like this isn't a first resort when you're noticing that your kid is struggling and you're worried about them. There's a lot of other options before.
Yeah, typically most of my students who I work with, it's not their first placement.
Yeah.
We have some students get to the long-term treatment that I work in having gone to multiple different places, or wilderness therapy, or psychiatric hospital, or stabilization, these various things. So a lot of times to get to that long-term treatment, it's just not the first step.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And do you have anything else you'd like to add? Anything we missed that you would like to say to parents who are going through this with their kids? Or
I do, actually. It's hard. It's there's a lot of self-judgment that goes into it. There's a lot of feeling like you're not enough as a parent, or you didn't do this or that. And while none of us are perfect, myself as a parent, I'm not perfect either. That judgment could get in the way of doing what's best for your kid, because in my work with adolescents, I always have the same goal. And that goal is to help set that child and the family system they live in up to be the best version of themselves. And that can be living as a teenager, that can be eventually transitioning into adulthood. But you as a parent, we know that you do love and care for your kid. And we know that is why you're wanting them to succeed. You're not wanting them to fail. You're wanting to put in this energy. Remember, there's supports out there. There's people who can help. And your love and your care for your kid is such an important thing. And remembering to spend that time and putting in that effort with your children is the baseline that starts it for being able to support them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shelby. We
Absolutely.
really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
I'm glad to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Last week, we asked our listeners to comment what challenges they think residential treatment centers face in regard to adolescent mental illness. We have put all of the responses in a bowl, and we will draw 3 to discuss this part of the episode. Due to some issues with the recording, we will only be able to share with you 1 response from our viewers. I know it sucks, but our recordings got messed up. I appreciate your patience with us, and I'm so glad that you're still here. All right, back to the podcast.
Okay, this one says that the teens are surrounded by bad influences. So even though they're surrounded by people who are going through similar struggles to them, which is good because they can feel that like they're not alone, this can also be an issue because they can like drag each other down in their issues. I had an experience once with this. I was working at a residential treatment center, and we had a couple students who were struggling with an eating disorder and a couple of students who were not at the time, but they were all together on a team. And what happened is they all made a pact with each other, and they were teaching each other how to induce throwing up, and they weren't eating together, and it was who can last the longest, who can eat the least, who can throw up the most. And it was really challenging for staff and professionals to be able to deal with that situation because the kids were just dragging each other down and making it worse. And I think that can be a huge issue regarding treatment centers because there's not a lot of places that have enough specialized professional help for students who are struggling this much and who are this high risk. So there's not a lot of places they can go, but when they do get there, the people that they're surrounded by maybe are not the best for their health and improvement.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes it more complex because on one hand, they have a community that shares the issues and they can, vent. Even if it might not even be the same thing, they're able to talk about one thing to another with their peers. But when they're starting to talk about those things and getting back into the patterns that they were in prior to being in a treatment center, especially because a lot of the time they're not there because they want to be there, it can become very detrimental to those who do want to be there or who have been seeing that success. And it really does make it very difficult because you really get a helpful tool, but it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it comes with its own challenges, exactly. So yeah, I think that concludes our discussion for today. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope that you got a lot out of this podcast. If you have any questions, our contact information will be listed in the description below.
And remember, for 10% off, put promo code BRAINSTORM for better help.
Thanks, guys.
Have a wonderful day.